Coming to you from BRIC House in downtown Brooklyn, this is 112BK. On the show today, after Puerto Rico suffered an island-wide blackout last week, one organization's plan to make sure it doesn't happen again. And a visit from a cellist who's performing next week on a peninsula overlooking the ocean. Yes, right here in Brooklyn. Hi and welcome to the show. I'm Ashley Ford. I'm back, but someone didn't get the memo, apparently. He's still in the studio.
Just holding down the fort, Ashley. Just holding down the fort. Besides, it's warmer in here, but I'm glad to have you back.
Well, what's going on?
What's going on? So all this Cuomo stuff, have you heard? He's impersonating Cynthia Nixon.
I've heard a little bit.
Yeah, the whole parolees getting their voting rights back, the paroled felons, which some people are saying maybe is a cynical move, trying to see if he can get those 35,000 votes. We're not sure yet whether if those people do indeed get their voting rights back, if they'll be able to vote in the coming cycle. So we'll see how cynical it actually is. But then there was this recent item today about the plastic bags. He wants to ban all single-use plastic bags.
Well, that sounds like a good idea, right?
Well, that would be a great idea because they are the bane of, I shouldn't say the bane of my existence, but everywhere, proliferating, 3 bags for one item when you go to the store. But also people are saying, well, he's doing this because, you know, he's trying to move acrobatically to the left to mute Cynthia Nixon's candidacy. But people are also saying that it might not even make a difference because this is just cosmetics, because this won't actually pass a Republican-held Senate. And then, you know, there was this funny tweet where somebody wrote, Cuomo is now a strawberry blonde. And when he was asked about it, he said, oh, no reason. What?
Yeah. Well, it's becoming an interesting race. It's getting really interesting. I remember when Cynthia Nixon said she was going to run, and some people were immediately dismissive, and now those people are like,
At least we're getting some movement, you know, and yeah, you know, it doesn't hurt to pull things a little bit leftward, right? So then there was this item from the weekend. On Earth Day, clean water advocate Christopher Swain took a dip in the Gowanus Canal to, well, we should have him tell us why. I think we have him on the phone.
Why did you do this, sir? Why did you jump into the Gowanus Canal? Talk to me about it.
Love makes people do crazy things.
What do you love?
I love the water, and I want it to be clean.
Yes.
Right, and so we were one of our researchers told us that in '72, I guess in the Clean Water Act, that the goal was to have all waterways in the country be swimmable. From your findings,
it's supposed to be by the mid-'80s, right?
By the mid-'80s, is the Gowanus swimmable?
The Gowanus is a toxic cesspool that could easily sicken or kill a swimmer. So no, there's a long way to go.
So what did you do to? Sorry, go ahead.
Say that again.
No, go ahead.
Swimming in the Gowanus as a visceral experience is powerful. I mean, you're eye level with sewage scum, coal tar residue, oil and gas sheen, trash. That's right there enough to cause all kinds of problems in the human organism. Not to mention it stinks and it looks bad. The federal standard is safe for swimming, paddling, and fishing every day. That's a navigable U.S. waterway, the Gowanus Canal. So from a federal legal standpoint, it's supposed to be clean already. The goal of my swims is to energize the cleanup, which we've done with the federal cleanup, but that's only going to address the muck on the bottom of the canal, the 10 to 20 foot deep layer of slop that they refer to in the NYPD mayonnaise. Scuba unit as the black mayonnaise, right?
Oh, God, that sounds delicious.
So that won't help the plumbing problems. That won't help the water, right? Right. So what I was saying is, okay, let's not stop short of cleaning the whole thing. Let's not just take out the muck and call it clean. How about a permanent end to the dumping of sewage into all NYC waterways?
Doesn't sound like a bad idea.
It doesn't sound like a bad idea. It sounds very reasonable.
We built an iPhone and a space shuttle. Like, it's in range.
Right.
It's totally in range. You're absolutely true.
Chris, what I wonder, you know, I feel like there are the 2.8 million Brooklynites out there who have never swum in the Gowanus Canal are going to want to hear about your experience and live vicariously through you. Can you tell us a little bit about the experience and what you did to ready yourself for this?
Sure. So since it's not safe for swimming, I had to have an exposure control plan. In other words, what am I going to do to try to keep this water off of me. So that was our goal, do a swim without getting wet. So that's sort of a tall order. We approached it by putting me in scuba boots and a dry suit, which kept the water off my skin, that covered me all the way up to the neck. Then I covered the rest of my exposed skin with water barrier gel, swim goggles, silicone cap, earplugs, and that left two obvious vectors to get water, my nose and my mouth. So the approach to that was to swim head up, grandma breaststroke. And I don't know about your grandmothers, but my grandmother swam head up breaststroke, I think, because they got their hair done once a week and they weren't going to put their head under.
So you never dunked? You never dunked your head?
I never dunked because that would be the easiest way to get it. Now,
oh my God,
when
I'm
you're
so
swimming,
glad you didn't dunk.
Water does splash, though, right? So I got water splashed in my mouth a couple times. The protocol for that is I gargle with hydrogen peroxide, swish it around in my mouth, and spit it out to try to kill whatever bacteria, viruses, and protozoa I might have gotten. And then I still ended up getting really bad diarrhea for several hours Sunday night. And then I had to take, then the next level of the protocol is start taking activated charcoal tablets to bind with whatever's in there and see if you can stop it. So that stopped it. Then some probiotics to like repopulate the intestine with friendly flora, right? And yesterday I felt really tired. Today I'm starting to feel better.
Wow.
Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate you having this conversation with us.
Oh, thank you. Well, it was, kind of a crappy swim, but the dream is a beautiful one.
We'll
right?
keep it going. Let's keep it going. All right.
We will. Take care.
Thanks a lot.
Christopher.
All right, bye-bye.
And coming up, there are 2 blackouts in 2 weeks in Puerto Rico. We'll speak to someone who's trying to help fix the beleaguered island's energy woes by introducing solar-powered microgrids into the system. And then, a Brooklyn gem not everyone knows about. On Stage at Kingsborough will give us a sample of an upcoming performance. Stay tuned. It's been more than half a year since Hurricanes Irma and Maria devastated Puerto Rico. In the months since, getting the power back on has been a clusterfuck. First, a nepotistic and lucrative deal was struck with a 2-person contractor in Montana that built the island's power authority. After that was ended, quickly, some U.S. volunteers stepped into the void. FEMA and the Army Corps of Engineers got involved, plus more contractors with questionable deals, but finally, power was restored to most of the island. Until one of those contractors mucked up the works and caused 2 recent blackouts. One that affected a quarter of the island's homes, and a second just last week that was island-wide. What to do? How about solar? Here with some possible answers for the beleaguered power grid is Walter Meyer, co-founder and executive director of the Coastal Marine Resource Center of New York with the Solar Libre Initiative. Welcome to 112BK.
How are you doing?
I'm fantastic. How are you doing today?
I'm grateful to be here with you.
Great. So every crisis presents an opportunity, obviously. When did you decide to get into the Puerto Rico power fray?
I guess the story goes back to after Hurricane Sandy here in New York City. And it starts in Rockaway Beach, a coastal community where we have personal and professional connections. And after Hurricane Sandy, when we saw how vast the need was, we created a program called Power Rockaway's Resiliency through our 501c3 called the Coastal Marine Resource Center. And that started out with crowdsourced funding. And then the city collaborated with us with a prime contract, the EDC. The program is simply to scale free solar for businesses in the most vulnerable ecological areas and vulnerable environmental areas. In the case with Sandy, Zone 1 of New York, the floodplain of New York, is your most vulnerable and environmental area.
Is Red Hook?
Red Hook is one of those, and areas where you have high concentrations of affordable housing, like NYCHA and other state programs, is where sort of the point of the arrowhead is for us on this social and environmental justice initiative.
Right.
And so we identify businesses within these double vulnerable communities within walking distance of each other and give them free geothermal, solar, battery backup systems, and wind, basically getting them 100% off-grid capacity,
right.
So that they become a future hub of safety in any future disturbances.
Okay, so we've talked a little bit about the aftermath of Sandy on this show, and certain initiatives that are being put in place, or that people are trying to put in place to make sure that the devastation that happened with Sandy, that we would never see that type of devastation in those areas again. How do you do that in Puerto Rico? How do you pinpoint those very vulnerable points, and how do you make sure that the contractors who are on the ground doing this work are not just saying, you know, we're reconstructing something, but also that we're putting something in its place so that what happened before doesn't happen again?
Well, the last thing you just said is the underpinning of resiliency, which means not to bounce back, not to patch back what was there, but to bounce forward and in some ways be stronger in these future disturbances rather than just survive. And so for us, and I'm a little extreme on this view for policy, but I don't think we should invest in the grid. I don't think we should invest in the microgrid. I think we should decentralize every single building on the island, except for very few instances when there are major loads, like a hospital, that may have to share power with other buildings, hence the microgrid discussion.
Why is that?
And you know, this is my opinion, not everyone in my group that I work with. We argue about this a lot. But personally, when I go on the island, every time I see a power pole going up, it's centralization versus decentralization, right? So every time the power pole goes up, it's maybe a dozen families that could have an off-grid battery and solar, where they would not have any power bills. So if there was a social program that had a $1,000 a month power bill, if you gave that to them for free, they would reinvest that over time. So it builds the economy from the ground up. And economists talk about the movement of or number of transactions in a given period. You know, the kind of the speed that money moves through the economy, and in those instances, working class tend to spend money they have faster compared to investment class, which waits, reinvests, and kind of aggregates. And so that the velocity of money, if you will, can be leveraged when you take the working class and give free power, essentially. I always feel that resilient energy is a human right, and we try to make energy as free as possible with our nonprofit work, which I volunteer and do nights and weekends on. But during my day job, which is a firm called Lola, we also work on high-end projects, as well as contracts with the city that help us pay the bills to do this nonprofit work.
Also, I'm guessing that you're able to probably take a few more chances, and what you learned from doing some of those for-profit projects informs what you can provide for people with these nonprofit projects. So what are some of the projects that you guys have going on the ground in Puerto Rico right now?
So the challenge was to scale up, and we had a team with many partners. Our approach is called an ecosystem approach, where we teach others how to do solar and then teach them how to teach others. So it's both an education and a volunteer platform. Then directly, we also have our own volunteers doing the installations who are teaching local use in the process of installation how to do solar, and then getting them paid positions with some of the green economy participating local businesses on the island. And I say green economy, that means the island is currently at about 2 to 3% of a green economy, and it really should be, the majority should be coming from the sun.
So what are we hearing from the ground? Like, how are people responding to the work that you're doing there? I have to think that with some of the things that have gone on in the past with Whitefish and these other companies, people might be a little skeptical. People might be, hard to convince that this is the right way to go. Like, how is that happening? How are those conversations going?
Well, we've only installed 41 sites. I mean, I say only because, there's 3.5 million people. But we've had partners who have installed collectively over 100 sites altogether. But these are, whole buildings, orphanages, clinics, emergency rooms that we've taken with off-grid capacity, which is really important because some of these are the only places in these isolated areas. So if you talk to those individuals, you'll get that experience of solar. But collectively, I've noticed there's a cultural awakening towards solar on the island and towards decentralization.
And people are really, you think, starting to wake up to the reality that that might be the best possible solution?
I think so. Part of it is before the hurricane, the grid had brownouts and blackouts locally, meaning city by city, probably monthly to bi-weekly. After the storm, as the grid has come back, there's been weekly blackouts and brownouts as opposed to monthly. And there's been full grid collapses about every quarter. So to me, it's not actually a story about Hurricane Maria. It just put a spotlight on an overarching problem of a one-way extraction of resources on the island.
Right.
You know, there's a ratio that for every U.S. dollar invested on the island, there's exponentially more leaving the island.
Yeah.
And, you know, just like the outer boroughs of New York, we need to find a ways to decolonize that relationship.
Absolutely.
And really think about the commonwealth and making the wealth common.
Absolutely. Ooh, I like that. Making the wealth common. Come through. I see you try to have a catchphrase. Can I ask you, you know, because one of the things that I think about then is I would love to see more of that work being done here. I would like to see more solar power, wind energy, like alternate forms of power being, you know, regularly not just touted, but also like those industries being used and happening right here in America. Do you think that, and not that Puerto Rico obviously isn't part, I mean the mainland, but do you think that Puerto Rico could end up being a really interesting test case for how well this could go?
You know, we felt our work in Rockaway was really a petri plate, but Puerto Rico is a test case of scale, right?
Yeah.
You know, Rockaway was 120,000 people or so, dozen different neighborhoods. Puerto Rico is 3.4 million people with 78 different municipalities that operate like a city-state, each of those municipalities. They have a history that goes back several hundred years that's built on an indigenous history that goes back 1,000 years. So it's really interesting continuity. Hard to compare some things other than some of these systems can scale.
Right.
But you need to shift gears to get there. But to understand the rate of scale, Puerto Rico is the size of Connecticut and about the population of Connecticut.
Right.
And the reason everyone in the renewable space around the planet is rushing to Puerto Rico is that they realize it's the first time that a country has had a territory the size of a state. And if you can take a state off grid or take a state to be 100% renewable, we only have 50 more to go on the mainland to get a whole country. So for me, and whether it's Australia and all the different like Sun and Battery and all the Vision Battery, all the groups that donated materials to our group and others on the island, they realize that this is a shifting of gears for renewables, right? There's been a lot of momentum, and I call this hashtag Planet Puerto Rico. If we can save Puerto Rico, we can save the planet.
I like the idea. I like the work you're doing. Thank you so much for being here today, Walter, and talking to me about it.
Cool.
Fantastic. When we spoke last week with the authors of the book Secret Brooklyn, one place we never discussed was Manhattan Beach, and in particular, Kingsborough Community College. It's about as far away as you could travel from here and still remain in Brooklyn. It's on the tip of a peninsula across from Sheepshead Bay. It's got its own beach and its own performing arts space with views of the ocean and a long-running program called On Stage at Kingsborough, with 4 more performances to go in their spring season. One of them is called Fiesta. And to tell us about it is Kingsborough's Executive Director, Anna Becker. Thanks for coming on the show, Anna. We're also joined by cellist Elad Kabilio. Welcome to 112VK, Elad. So, Anna, a lot of Brooklynites, and I'm guessing more Brooklynites than you suspect, don't know about Kingsborough College and about this beautiful placement that you guys have. Why do you think that is? Can you tell me about it? Because it seems really special.
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a question that keeps me up at night often.
Yeah.
I will say I've found that if you're north of Prospect Park, that's very, very true. If you're south of the park, going from east to west, down and in Staten Island, you know Kingsborough, and everywhere you go, someone has a sister that went there or worked there, something like that.
Right.
So we're very well known in the southern parts and not as well known in the northern parts. And I just imagine that's because Brooklyn is so many things to so many people. There's so much to do.
That makes sense. What about just where it's so beautiful where you guys are. It seems like, you wouldn't necessarily think, to be perfectly honest, and I know, a lot of people tend to be sort of down on community colleges and not understanding how much they can serve a community and also how much they can serve their students. But on top of some of those very practical services, you guys have the very wonderful extra bonus of being in a really beautiful place.
It is truly beautiful, and sometimes I can't believe I'm working in New York City. I grew up in New York, but I go out to take a walk and I'm looking at the ocean, and one of our venues overlooks the ocean. That's where Fiesta will take place, and it's stunning, and it is a very well kept secret in some ways, but in other ways we have about 18,000 people walk through our shows a year, and about as many students walk the campus every year. So
they know.
It's a very big, well-kept secret.
It's like maybe they actually don't want the rest of us to know, to be perfectly honest. Elad, let me ask you, how wonderful is it to be able to perform in a space like that? And how important is location to your performances?
So for me, it's so special because we're based in Manhattan, my organization, Music Talks. And whenever we're coming to Kingsborough, and this is our 4th year, which is very exciting, whenever we're coming there, and each time with different artists, they're like, oh, you said it's in Brooklyn. You didn't promise the beach. So it is very, very, very special, and it's like it opens your eyes, and it makes a whole difference. And we're very fortunate to perform actually the Lighthouse quite often, so we get to see it. And when we get there, usually also there's enough light before sunset. So it's so wonderful. During sound check, you're like relaxing and like you taking in, and you walk outside and you take in also the smell. So it's so nice thinking like, okay, this is a performance in Brooklyn. Not that often you get this when you go out to perform in Brooklyn.
Yes,
the
absolutely.
smell of the sea, just to clarify that point.
Yes, absolutely, the smell of the sea. Now, can you tell me, how did you end up booking this program, Fiesta?
What a great question. As Elad said, he has been working with us for 4 seasons now. So he's also brought Music Talks to our main stage. We did a Hanukkah concert this past season, and he's brought many things to our Lighthouse: jazz, classical, opera. So we originally met when we had a dance company in residence that Elad was the music director for, and he played cello and blew me away, and we started talking, and he said, I have this whole other company, and we went from there. But he's really so versatile, and he knows how to engage audiences.
Like
it's wonderful.
Elad, talk to me about the company. Talk to me about Music Talks and Fiesta.
So Music Talks' mission is to bring new audiences to different types of music, usually music that you are not exposed to. So mainly classical music, but also jazz and musical theater. And the idea is to bring the story behind the music, so you can connect to it in a new way. So as the title of the organization, Music Talks, we talk about the music, so we give introductions to each piece. In Fiesta, we have a very special program. I can guarantee that almost the entire audience have never heard 4 cellos playing together.
I've never heard that.
So another reason to come to our
I was just telling you guys, I
concert.
heard some cellos a couple weeks ago. I heard 3 different cellos, but cellos at the same time, it's never really happened to me.
Yeah, cello is a wonderful instrument. Yes, I'm very, very biased. But cello is becoming more and more a known and beloved instrument because of its register. It's the human voice. It can give you so much. And when you put 4 cellos together, you get even more. And when you put Spanish and Latin American music, you get even more. And when you add a terrific soprano, you truly get everything you could possibly want.
So this is going to be the show everybody wants to see. How do people get tickets?
Well, they can visit onstageatkingsborough.org. They can call 718-368-5596, or they can stop by our box office, which is on the lovely campus that you've been talking about.
And when's the show? It's
May 1st, Tuesday, May 1st at 7 p.m., overlooking the ocean in our lighthouse space.
Absolutely. And Elad, you're going to play us a song, right? Can you tell us about it?
Yes, I'm going to play a Spanish piece that was written by the famous Gaspar Casado. I'm sure everybody knows Gaspar Casado. Don't you love Gaspar Casado?
Yes, I do.
But you're gonna love Gaspar Casado after you hear the music. Gaspar Casado is a Spanish composer, but he's a cellist composer. So it has two sides to it. On the one hand, it's really bad for me as a cellist because he knows what I can do, and he writes it for the cello. So he really understands the instrument, and he was very loyal to his Spanish heritage, like many Spanish composers. So he captures so much in the piece. So for a moment, I need to be a guitar player. For a moment, I'm a flamenco dancer. So it makes the cello so versatile and shows everything that this instrument can offer.
Fantastic. Now, before the performance, that's the show for today. I'm so sorry. We'll be back tomorrow with Black Lives Matter activist Darnell Moore and the country's first exhibition featuring the work of Latin American and Latino women, now at the Brooklyn Museum. Hope you can join us, and in the meantime, Elad is going to play us out.